So hello again, my name is Spencer. This is Amelia. We don't have anybody else to turn on the video for us. And welcome, we're going to be doing a hip opener sequence today. And this is all going to be floor based. So there's lots of different ways to do hip opener series. You can be standing, you can be on your back, you can be on your belly. We're going to do this entire sequence on the floor, however. So we're going to be, so just give you a little bit of anatomy of the hip. So you have two hip joints, right side and left side. They are ball and socket joints. So this is the femur as it fits into the hip bone, and different people have different depths of their hip bones. So everybody's a little bit different. So when we talk about hip openers, a lot of it has to do with everybody's personal anatomy. Some people have very, very open hips and can move their legs and hips in lots of different directions, and other people don't. If you're a runner, for example, you might have some tight hips. If you're an athlete, you might have some tight hips. If you've had some injuries, you might have some tight hips. So there are lots of different ways to open the hips by rotating one way and rotating the other. So we're going to take a lot of internal and external rotation of the hips today. If you have any hip issues, you certainly want to be mindful of not causing any additional damage to yourself. But by and large, these are very gentle stretches and lengthening opportunities for the hip joints. But again, if you have any issues, if you feel any pain, please discontinue. So Amelia, would you please begin in child's pose? Let's face there. So lots of different ways to do child's pose, but in this particular situation, we're going to bring the knees out wide and the toes come together. And then she's going to bring her arms out, bringing the chest towards the floor, melting the heart towards the floor. Arms are out long. You can bring the arms behind you a little bit as well. And you should feel a little bit of a pull in the inner inguinal area, in the groin area. Okay. You want to think about bringing your hips to your heels. So you're sitting down, you're pressing forward with your upper body as your lower body is pressing down onto your heels. Now you may or may never get your heels and hips together, and that's okay. It doesn't really matter, but that's the destination. That's where you're going to. So we'll let her marinate in child's pose for a couple more moments.
I'm marinating.
This is a fairly simple hip opener. It's also a rest pose when we're doing our yoga full practices. Child's pose is always a great pose to come back to. We always tell people if they feel tired, if they feel winded, find your way into child's pose and stay there as long as you want. We'll stay there for a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Begin to bring your hands back towards your body. And then roll onto your back with your head at the top of the mat. And we'll move into Happy Baby. So in Happy Baby, the legs come up tall. The knees are bent. The knees flare out wide. So you're opening the hips here. Now, you can grab your shins if that's where you can get to. You can grab your ankles if that's where you can get to. You can grab the outside or inside of your feet. In a perfect world, I like to see people grabbing the outside of their feet and bringing the elbows to the inside of the knees. The soles of my feet are facing skyward. My elbows are pressing out. My ankles are directly over my knees, and maybe rock side to side. Now you may feel a little bit of a pinching in the hip joint here. That's okay. And then if you're comfortable here, you can begin to pull down on the soles of your feet and now really feel that into the hip joint. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Make your way back to a seated position. And we're going to move into cobbler's pose, Baddha Konasana. So, soles of the feet come together, knees are out wide, back is tall. So I have a string, I'm pulling your crown of your head towards the ceiling. Shoulders are slightly retracted back, chest is open, soles of the feet together. Maybe if you can grab your toes, maybe butterfly your knees, and then come to stillness and think about pressing the knees towards the floor. Now, some people can't get their knees any more than this, and that's okay. But gradually, over time, over 15 years of practice, I've been able to get my knees almost to the floor, which I never would have believed that I could have done. Pressing down, using your breath. As you inhale, you grow, and as you exhale, you press the knees down towards the floor. Maybe if you'd like, you can take your elbows pressing into the knees ever so slightly. The hands into the knees. Again, feeling that lengthening, feeling that stretching in the inguinal region, the adductor muscles. Inhale. We'll take 5 final breaths here. I keep losing my piece of paper. Final breath. Now we're going to move into what is called cow face posture. My left leg bends so that my knee is facing forward. My heel is touching my glute, if I can get it there. Right leg bends and comes on top.
So I always do like lean forward to get there. Is that okay?
It's okay. That works.
It's just easier.
It gets there.
It's not the easiest.
So
posture.
one day, your knees are lined up and touching. Now, a lot of people have their knees up like this, and they can't even remotely think of getting their knees together. And that's okay also. You will eventually get there. Practice, practice, practice. If you are one of those people who has a little bit more flexibility, and you have your feet back in this position, you can take the heels of your wrists, place them into the top of your foot, and press back. Now, this posture takes your hip into what is known as internal rotation. Cobbler's pose, child's pose, and happy baby, the postures we've done just prior, they take your hips into external rotation. This brings your hips into full internal rotation. So we're taking the hip joint through its full range of internal and external rotation. We'll take 5 final breaths here. And release. Let's take it to the other side. So the right knee comes under. Left knee comes on top. However you want to get into it is however you get into it. Knees are stacked over one another. One day the knees might even be touching one another.
Sorry.
And you may feel a big difference from side to side because your hip joints, as the rest of our bodies, are not perfectly symmetrical. So you may have a little bit of a deeper joint in one side than the other. And if so, you might not have quite as much range of motion, or you might have had an injury at some point, or you have some genetic predisposition. So again, the distance and the posture itself is not as important as the pathway getting there. If you're comfortable here, you can press into the tops of your feet. And if you're really comfortable, then you can begin to lean forward ever so slightly Just feel that stretching sensation on the hip joints.
I'll be the example of sitting up straight.
We'll take 5 final breaths. And release. Now we're going to take the right leg, bend at the knee, and the shin is parallel to the top of your mat or your blanket. And then the left leg comes on top. So the left ankle is on top of the right knee, the left knee is on top of the right ankle, and the shins, if possible, are stacked on top of one another. So I have a nice triangle in here. This is called full pigeon. Now, if you have a huge space between your knee and your ankle, that's not unusual. Maybe place a blanket in there, or if you have a block, a yoga block that you're using, or if you have a pillow, you can place that in there. But if you can get your legs on top of one another, that's where you're ultimately going. This is a hip external rotator. Takes that hip joint, the ball and socket joint, and rotates it outwardly. If you're comfortable here, and you want to come down to your forearms, we'll take 5 final breaths. Begin to walk your hands back. That felt really good. Now we'll go to the other way. So now the left shin is parallel to the top of your mat or towel. Right knee on left ankle on left knee, shins stacked. Now for me, it's a little bit more difficult on this side. I don't have quite the range of motion in the right hip than I do in the left, so my knee is not feeling quite as open as on the other side. Full pigeon. Again, if you're comfortable here, maybe leaning forward. Five final breaths. Begin to walk the hands back to the body. We'll do one final posture in this sequence. Legs come out wide. Toes facing up. Inhale. Now, before we do this, sometimes I sit on a pillow or a block to lift my hips up. Gives me a little bit more range of motion as I come forward. I don't have that right now, so we're just going to sit flat. But if you have a pillow or something you can sit on to lift you up a few inches, that might be beneficial. Inhale, arms come up tall. Exhale and fold. And for the life of me, this is as far as I've been able to get.
You and me both.
Some people can get their chest right onto the floor. I am not one of those people yet. Engaging the core here, sucking the belly button in, touching the spine with the belly button, feeling that stretch in the inner thigh muscles for 5 final breaths. Begin to walk the hands back. Legs come in. Easy seated posture. And that is your hip opener floor series for today. Namaste.